Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Real Estate Update webinar presented by Agent eLearning. I am your co-host, Meagan Campion, and with me, as always, whether I want him here or not, is Sterling Fryar. And today we're joined by Deputy Chief Economist for National Association of Realtors, Jessica Lautz. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us today. Take a few minutes and introduce yourself. Tell everybody how you joined NAR, how long you've been with NAR, and what you do there.
Yeah, no, I've been at NAR forever. I have been there since 2007, always in the research group. I have really grown up at NAR, I would say. Before that, I worked in a couple nonprofits in DC, and I really found that real estate research really hits home for me. It is truly something that impacts everyone. It's something that everyone wants to understand, especially right now. It is certainly a hot topic when we think about housing affordability, rental costs, where are people going to live and how they're doubling up too. So I do research there on members, on consumers. We're putting it out there for realtors. We're putting it out there for the ecosystem of real estate for everyone to understand better.
Great.
What does a typical day look like for you?
So I will tell you that I'm really excited today because this is my last presentation of the year. So that marks 110 presentations this year that I have done. So a lot of presenting, a lot of talking to the media. I started this morning at 8:30 this morning with a call with the Wall Street Journal. It is a lot of but it's a lot of putting out research as well. So we're trying to make sure that we have the best research, the most solid research that we can possibly put out. So working with our team on programming, on display of data, on talking about data, on how we can really highlight and put the best information out there.
That's great. Well, I'm glad we could step up from the Wall Street Journal. That's, an easy one to follow. That's good.
I mean, what were you talking about with the Wall Street Journal? Just curious.
So they're doing a story and it looks like they're doing one on remodeling. And that's something that I think is really important right now as we think about the lock-in effect of low interest rates, remodeling expectations. Certainly, we do think that they're going to grow. So last week, we actually had our forecast summit. We had the chief economist from the home builders join us as well. And their forecast also strong for remodeling moving forward because people are going to have to reimagine their home. If they bought their home and they had little kiddos in it, or they bought their home and they didn't have an expectation of an elderly relative moving in and suddenly they do, people are going to have to envision how they're using their home in their space.
So do you see, so if I went to go remodel my house, I may end up looking at a home equity loan, which is typically, a point higher than normal mortgage rates. Right. How are these homeowners justifying that versus finding something at a slightly, at a lesser rate, at plus construction costs?
Right. No, I think this is a really good question. A lot of people are in love with their homes, right? So maybe they bought perhaps a bigger home than they would have when interest rates were higher. Perhaps it's in that perfect location. So they just want to remodel and stay put. Inertia, I think that's certainly, we could throw that in there too. The scariness of having to move, of having to do that. But I think that's a solid conversation to have with potential clients and sellers who are stuck on the fence of, well, if you go into this, you're still financing at a higher rate. So why would you do that versus taking the housing equity that you have earned as home prices have gone up and really putting down a large down payment and perhaps offsetting the higher mortgage rate that you would have on that primary residence?
So for those of you watching, we do have a chat feature. So if you have any questions for Jessica, please feel free to put those in there. But I know Sterling and I have a list of questions for you today. So let's start by kind of looking back at 2024. I know that it's been a little bit crazy. Sterling and I both have been in real estate for 20 years, started in 2007, 2008. So this market is kind of a little bit different for those of us who went through 2007 and 2008. But for people, from going from 2020, 21, 22 to this market, what surprised you about 2024 in the home market?
Well, I will say that our expectations moving into this year, originally, if we were to flip the calendar back and look at January of 2024, we expected stronger home sales activity. And we just did not hit those expectations. And the reason why is there's plenty of pent-up demand. There's plenty of people right now who really do want to purchase their first home, who perhaps are doubling up with relatives, are renting, are unsatisfied doing that, want home ownership. We expected more inventory to be coming in. It was really trickles when we look at new construction and the lack of movement from existing homeowners. And then interest rates went higher. They came down a little bit from October of 2023. We got excited, and then they started moving back up again. And so that really tampered demand as well. So as we close out the year, we're expecting that we're going to see higher home sales activity into 2025. And the encouraging signs that we see now are that we already are starting to see higher home sales activity. We're already seeing in winter months, in late fall, we're already seeing that buyers are coming back into the market, that they are encouraged, that they are seeing more inventory in their local markets, that sellers are starting to have a conversation with buyers as opposed to, no, I will only take the highest offer and $100,000 more. And when you have negotiation on the table, that's encouraging too.
Absolutely. I know we had talked a little bit about the demographics of buyers, and one thing that you mentioned that's very interesting is that we're seeing the lowest share of first-time home buyers and the highest share of cash buyers. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so first-time home buyers obviously really struggled in the last year getting into the market. When we think about housing affordability, the lack of inventory that's out there, but then if you think about all of the things that are outside of the housing market, like student loan debt and childcare costs and car loans and saving for a down payment in a high inflationary environment, this is just impossible for so many young adults to be able to do that. And so over time, their age actually grew to the highest that we've ever seen as well. The median age being 38 years old versus if we look 40 years ago, they would have been 28 years old. So they're just, these struggles and these headwinds are really putting a lot of pressure on them. Then at the same time, on the complete flip side of the coin, we have homeowners who have this tremendous amount of housing equity. So we have nearly a third of repeat buyers in the market are buying a home with all cash. And those are primary residence buyers. So it is a very striking real estate market right now where we have really the haves and the have-nots in real estate.
Yeah, and I mean, how much of that is, the cash buyers, and maybe not even the resale type, but those that are that have the cash, that are wealthy, they want to buy for cash versus being able to borrow. I have multiple clients, like big money clients, that they're like, no, we would love to borrow the money, but we can make this money work for us better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So, people have earned this tremendous amount of housing equity. The equity gains that they have, they can make their next purchase with all cash. They've been chalking away savings, and they've been able to save because of their low interest rate mortgage, because they've been saving on that as well. They are able to take out money from the stock market and also put that towards the transaction. So if they can pull all these sources, they're really making this transaction, often moving longer distances as well. So if you're a retiree, you're moving to someplace, warm weather client, looking at Sunbelt states, moving to these areas and looking at a more affordable property. What's striking to me, though, is that 1 in 10 first-time home buyers, even in this really difficult environment, purchased a home with all cash. 1 in 10.
Wow.
And we didn't understand how. And so we really wanted to dig into the data and understand how this young adult, with all of the narrative of having a hard time entering, is being able to do this. And what we were able to discover is that they're using savings, they're using the bank of mom and dad for a gift or loan, and they're using the stock market, they're cashing out financial assets, even cryptocurrency. And then after that, they actually have the highest share using inheritance that we've ever seen. So waiting for grants to pass, perhaps, is their savings plan to buy a new house. I'm not entirely sure. We'll call it rich uncle. But it's an interesting approach that we're seeing for young adults today in homeownership.
So how much of that is because of the increase in taxes and insurance?
Mm-hmm.
That when a cash buyer comes in, they're still obviously responsible for taxes and insurance, or assuming they hold insurance. But a complaint I've heard is that even if I buy for cash, my monthly payment, quote unquote, is going to be at least $1,000 or $1,500 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a motivation for some of this?
It certainly could be. And then if we also look at HOAs, right? So if you have an HOA, Everyone's going to have utility costs at the end of the day too, whether you're using it in HOA or not. And so just thinking about all of those added household expenses, it all adds up. And so certainly you have to factor in the entire cost of home ownership. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing this lower share of first-time home buyers as well, is it's not just the housing affordability. Though home prices have been going up this year in most areas of the country, it's really also looking at the entire ecosystem of purchasing a home.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough conversation to have. I mean, you know, I heard this stat last year, especially when rates were going up. How much does a buyer's purchasing power decrease at every point of interest rate increase?
I would have to do the math really quick off the top, so I'm not going to make up a number. So we'll
that's fair.
Yeah.
I'd heard like 10,000 for every X point or whatever. I can't remember exactly, so I don't want to make it up either. But it's fairly substantial.
So if we just look for between 3.5 interest rate and a 7% interest rate, you're talking about at least $500 a month difference in that mortgage payment on a monthly basis for a $400,000 home with 20% down. So again, the ideal scenario where not many people put 20% down anyway for a first-time home buyer. And so you are talking about a very big chunk of change.
So, you know, we're talking about the age of home buyers going up, and 38 is very young. I just want to make sure that point is made out there. But how are we, you know, what effects are you seeing with that age going up? Are we seeing more generational housing? Are we seeing you know, multi-generational? Are we seeing families buying, you know, out here we see families buying land and putting multiple houses on it. How are y'all tracking that data, and what are you seeing from that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are seeing that people are getting into homeownership in really creative ways. So we're seeing more roommate scenarios. We're seeing more unmarried couples. We're seeing more singles in the market, but we are seeing an all-time high of multi-generational homes. So 17% of buyers actually purchasing with a multi-generational home. And the number one reason to do so is actually for an elderly relative to move in. So thinking about a household where you know that caregiving is going to be on the line, where you want to be thinking about that and moving forward and really thinking about perhaps safe places to do that. The second reason for multi-generational housing is actually for a young adult to boomerang back. So young kids, maybe in that household, but kids over the age of 18, maybe after high school, college, just not leaving the nest yet. And so we do see a lot of that as well. And if we look overall in the US, if we're looking outside of home buyers, we see that both of those family types are really increasing for elderly adults to move in and for young adults. Housing is really expensive, but caregiving really top of mind for most families too.
Great. And I know you mentioned about single people buying houses. One of the statistics that you had mentioned when we were getting ready for this was single women. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I think they're so impressive. And I'll tell you why. When we look at single women, they're second only to married couples among home buyers. They've increased in the last year, and they've increased in an environment where housing affordability is so difficult. So they're making all of these financial sacrifices on the lowest household income to be able to enter into homeownership. And that's really striking to me, that she's saying, oh, I'll just cut spending everywhere. I won't have that same budget for perhaps brunch and buying clothes, just to completely stereotype. But maybe I'll take a second job. Maybe I'll move in with my family first to be able to not pay rent and to save a little more. She's really making a lot of financial sacrifices to do that. But she's a quarter of all first-time home buyers, 20% of buyers overall. I mean, that's incredible.
What's I'm going to call it the demographic, like, you know, what is the age range? Are there children involved in that statistic?
Yeah, so there can be. In fact, we do see that single women are more likely to have both children, but also more likely to be purchasing a multi-generational home. So on both sides, she is more likely to be a caregiver. And so purchasing a home for that. But what I think is interesting is that her age is higher than single men when they go to purchase a home. So she has to save for a longer period of time. Not a surprise, because she's doing so on a lower household income in comparison.
And while we're talking about demographics, one thing that I've heard you talk about a lot, and it makes me laugh because I've got a story that goes with it, is the effect that pets have on home ownership and people's choices.
Yes. Yeah, pets are huge. And pets are huge to single women. Pets are huge to unmarried couples. Pets are huge to families. Obviously, it's across the board. And so
Men.
it really resonates. 16% of buyers factored in their pet into their neighborhood choice. That's a lot of people saying, well, what is a walkable neighborhood, a fenced yard, a bigger yard, making sure that their house works for their pets. And I know that this is like, I think it's kind of silly, but I also think it's incredible. There's $147 billion spent on pets in the last year. That's a tremendous amount of money that people are giving to their pets and really thinking about training them and caring for them and vet bills and so on and so on. And so it shouldn't be so much of a surprise that a house also factors into these fur babies.
I was telling Sterling ahead of time, the best pet story that I have is we had a buyer who had 16 cats.
Oh my God.
They could not all stay in the same room because they fought. And then the layout of the house, she had to look at the layout of the house because she wanted them to be able to go out of one room into their catio. And y'all, catios are a thing, even though Sterling says I'm not going to make catio happen. It's real.
Yeah.
They go
It's
out
so
into this
fetch.
screened porch. I'm going to make fetch happen. Look, okay. They go out on the screen porch, and then she wanted them to be able to come back in a different room and like be able to access it. It was all I could do to get that buyer in the house, and we did. But y'all, 16 cats, and that was her main motivation was the animals. That's what she was looking at homes for. And so sometimes I think as agents, we overlook that a lot because we're so focused on the job and the, hospitals and the children and the family dynamic and whatever it might be. And we don't think about how important people's pets are to them.
So I will tell a personal remodeling story. I have an old townhouse and we have 4 cats. And so we needed a place for cat litter boxes. And so we had an empty corner in the basement. And we had a closet built, and they have a door in and a door out because, the cats can fight, but also there's plexiglass walls and an air filter and everything you need for the cat litter. So it's not just storing a bathroom, which is a complete game changer in our house. So I figure when I sell, which I'm sure I will at some point, we'll just pretend it's like a lacrosse closet or something like that. You can put all your stinky sports equipment in there for your kids. Like, it's fine.
It's perfect. I mean, and these things can be, different uses. They talk about, people have installed dog washing stations and people use it to rinse off when they come in if they've been working outside, whatever it is, and it can be used. You just have to have that vision, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think these are like approachable remodeling projects and approachable ideas versus what I've also heard, like people spending crazy amounts of money to put their pets on private jets so that when they're flying, they're not like flying commercial or something. I don't know. Like, that's insane. That's crazy.
That's a totally different income demographic than what we're talking about.
Absolutely. I would like to know that person to also go on that private jet one day.
I hear that. No, I think my wife has I don't even know, $800 iRobot cat litter box thing. And of that 147 billion, I'm in there.
Does it work better than your typical just scoop? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, there you go.
It was a solid purchase. It was great.
Is your wife listening right now? Is that why?
She is. She is. And so, as mentioned, first-time home sales reached an all-time low, and all cash home sales reached an all-time high. What can real estate agents glean from these changes in buyer demographics? How should they adjust their strategies and approaches for 25?
Yeah, I mean, really good question. So I'm not an agent, I'm just a researcher, but I'll tell you the data and what we're seeing. So I would not expect that we're going to see all cash buyers go away anytime soon. I think they're pretty much here to stay. And for the future, the near future at least. And the reason why I'll say that is that we know that a majority of buyers are repeat buyers in the market. We know that their median age also went up. It's now 61 years old if we look back 40 years ago, it used to be a typical repeat buyer was actually 36. So if we look at that dramatic shift towards someone who's essentially a baby boomer who's purchasing a home, they have a lot of housing equity. They're sitting on a lot of money. They're able to make an optional move. They're not moving for a job necessarily. They're probably moving to be close to the grandbabies or to have a more relaxing life or to move for affordability. So these all cash buyers are probably here to stay for a while. For first-time home buyers, while we saw it at an all-time low, there should be plenty of pent-up demand because we know that the biggest demographic in the U.S. age-wise is actually young adults at that peak home buying age. So we're feeling the pressure on the housing market. We don't have enough inventory for them, but we should be seeing them coming in. And we also know that they're doubling up with family. And so that pent-up demand is certainly there. And those who are doubling up with family probably might be in a better situation to be able to move into homeownership because they're skipping paying rent. So that could give them the opportunity to really save for a down payment.
Okay. So hypothetically, a friend of yours comes and, we have so much recency bias with the low interest rates and everything. What is a message that you tell, say, a good friend of yours? Because we can all, as agents, as brokers and everything, we can always say, oh yeah, the 52-year average on a 30-year fixed is roughly 7.5, 7.74. Oh, well, so-and-so, my friend down the street has a 2.75, 3.25, even a 4. And, I would love to see those rates come back. We all would. But, how do you have that conversation as an economist?
Yeah, I will tell you frankly that I do have those conversations, and I have them even with neighbors who live in my community who are currently renting and they would love to buy a house, but they don't have that opportunity to. And what I have said and what I would say is that rates are expected to be in the 6% range in 2025. Like, we really do not expect rates to move below 6%. And as we look at that, it's not just NAR's forecast. We actually, when we had the forecast summit, we had 7 other chief economists from other organizations, whether it's state and local associations or coming from NAHB, the Mortgage Bankers Association, Realtor.com, and everyone across the board was saying about 6%. So I think just level setting and saying, if you're waiting for rates to come down, you're going to be waiting a really long time, and home prices at the same time are going to be going up. Mm-hmm. So that's an equation that you'll want to factor in. Does that make sense for you to wait financially? Then wait. But if it doesn't make sense for you, there's no reason to do that. If rates ever come down that low before, again, you can always refinance in the future. If you're financially ready to purchase a home, then that's your decision to make now.
Okay, same question, but you're talking to somebody that bought at 3%. That they are ready to move. They want that different school district. They want that different whatever. They've got their 16 cats and they love the catio in this other, house, but they know that it's going to be mortgage rates are roughly 6.7, 6.9 right now, depending on where you are and your buying power, et cetera. How do you have that conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. So that conversation is, if you're not happy in where you are right now, look at the housing equity that you have. Look at how much buying power you have that you have earned as being a homeowner and how big of a down payment that you can actually put down. Talk to your experts. Make sure that they're doing the math and running the numbers for you, because every situation is completely different. So look at the home prices within those communities, but that's where your experts, your realtor, your mortgage broker are going to come in and be able to help you and determine what you can afford and how much your mortgage payment may actually change. And you may be in a better situation if you make that move.
So let's switch gears a little bit. We're talking a lot about interest rates and inventory and how hard it is for first-time homebuyers to get in. Let's talk about new construction, because that kind of was where I feel a lot of people got pointed when interest rates started going up.
Yeah.
But now we're seeing building costs going up. We're seeing some regulatory issues. How do you think that's going to affect the new construction market?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are seeing more new construction come in. It has been really fits and starts. So it has not been consistent, strong building throughout the last year. As we move into 2025, the home builders are encouraged. We are encouraged that we will see more building of new construction. This is a good thing. for a couple of reasons. One, we need the inventory. Two, we do expect that because interest rates have come down, so they even touched near 7% this fall, so they have come down to 6, low 6s. So as we look at that, we know that builders have to borrow to be able to build as well. And so they're encouraged, they're seeing their borrowing costs go down, they're bringing more inventory in, they see plenty of demand in the market to bring this inventory in. The big questions are, what type of inventory? Is it going to be large homes, McMansions, or is it going to be smaller properties that we really need? Those smaller properties can be used for single adults, certainly, child-free families, empty nesters. All of these buyers may be wanting a smaller property, and they're really encountering an environment with bigger properties right now. So we do need to be looking at that. And then rate buy downs. That's an opportunity for home buyers to actually purchase a home and perhaps get a lower interest rate if that builder has the money to be able to do so.
Yeah, a problem we have in our area is lot prices are so high.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they haven't seen that decrease, that stabilization that it needs to have. And so our construction costs have remained very high just because of that. And so our new construction inventory has really slowed. And so, I mean, that's a component of it as well, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's different in every area in the country. Some of them have really extreme density restrictions, so you can't build townhouses within those communities. You can only build large single-family homes. Some of them, it's a real big labor supply issue, the supply of materials, the impact fees of new construction, all of these issues really holding back construction in so many communities around the U.S.
So, okay, So we're not all single family practitioners, right? You know, I do commercial, farm and ranch. What does NAR look at in those different, you know, whether it's commercial, multifamily, or farm and ranch? Or, you know, do they group them? Do they separate them? You know, can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have a separate report that actually is dedicated to land. And then what I would definitely encourage folks to check out is that we have an incomplete commercial section of our research website that is dedicated to commercial. On a quarterly basis, we're actually putting out commercial metro reports so that you can actually look at your local metro. It's, I think, 280 some areas in this country so that are being looked at. So it's not just major areas, it's also tertiary markets. And then it's broken down by industrial, retail, hospitality. I'm not going to remember all of them, but There's a lot of details in those local metro reports. So definitely check that out.
Where can we get that?
That's on nar.realtor in the research section, and then in the commercial section. But honestly, if you just put into Google commercial metro reports, NAR research, it'll pop up, and then you'll find it.
Perfect.
So talk about the land, because I know I do land a lot, and that's getting to be a little bit more because the home market's a little difficult. So we're seeing agents kind of branch out into commercial and land and farm and ranch and whatever it might be. What kind of statistics or research do y'all have for the land?
Yeah, so we have an entire report dedicated to the land. And that's actually something that one of our economists is working on like right now. So he's looking at an update to that, and we should have that in early 2025. I will tell you, I am not the expert in that area. What I will tell you is that we are hearing a lot about residential experts looking at commercial and looking at it as an option to really branch out and to think about that as a secondary path, really.
Absolutely. I will say really quickly, it's not only geographic competence, it's transactional competence. Please branch out, but do it the right way.
And talk to your broker.
Talk to your broker. All right. So looking into 2025, I know we don't have a crystal ball. If we did, our job would be a whole lot easier. But what trends are y'all looking at in 2025? What are you thinking for interest rates? How much do you hate the Pantone color of the year? Just everything about 2025. Let's talk about that.
All right. Well, the best question there was the color of the year. I don't know if you follow all on Instagram the Smithsonian, but the Smithsonian just did major trolling. They were like, here's some artifacts, and you can imagine what those artifacts were. I'll just leave it there. So when we look at 2025, we are expecting interest rates in the 6% range. So 6 to 7%, we're really not expecting that interest rates are really going to go big swings down. When we look at home sales activity, we are expecting both for new homes and for existing homes that home sales activity will be stronger. So roughly 10% for both 2025 and for 2026 increases in home sales. We have a range in our forecast, and that is posted on NAR.realtor in our forecast summit area. You can actually grab a slide deck that shows the precise range in there, but roughly 10% increase in home sales. Home prices, we do expect that they will be going up in 2025, but not the extremes, not the double-digit home price increases that we saw, but a continual steady increase in home prices. And demand is certainly there. We certainly have a lot of young adults, and we have a lot of homeowners with a lot of cash that they're sitting on who may be ready to make that move now.
Great. You were talking about that range, and all I can think, Sterling and I are economists. That's what our degrees are in. And all I can think is a big dot theory, right? If you make the dot big enough, eventually the lines will intersect. That's kind of what we do as economists, right?
Okay, you capture many things.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so I was just looking before we came on. I'm a member of multiple MLSs, but I pulled statistics from 22, 23, and year to date 24 for 3 different MLSs, and we're all clustered really close together here. One saw a 1.26% decrease year over year. One saw a 4.68 decrease year over year, and then my market saw a 1.76 increase year over year. And I mean, we're talking within 90 miles, 100 miles of each other.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy the different things that come into factor whenever you're talking about supply and demand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, jobs, positive tax situation are certainly attracting a lot of people when we look at people who are moving for work, but then also for retirees as well. And so those migration trends we'll likely see consistently as we move into 2025 too. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind is that where you are in the country, what is the availability of homes? What is the availability of affordability in those areas too?
What is the number one migration trend? I'm just curious.
The number one migration trend is to move close to friends and family. That's the number one reason to actually sell a home and move. But the number one areas to move to, the top areas to move to are not a surprise. It's Florida, it's Texas, it's the Carolinas, Tennessee after that. So we're seeing a lot of migration into those Sunbelts consistently.
So I asked my mom, what would be her motivation, and it was weather, and just, and I was like, well, what about me and my wife and my sister and the grandbaby? She's like, nah, I don't like the cold. I'm going to Florida.
Sorry, the good weather is going to top you.
Even your mom's trying to get away from you at this
I know.
Oh my goodness.
She can't. Tammy B asked, what is the forecast for luxury real estate and second home markets?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So luxury moving up. So in fact, we have seen that homes that are, so luxury is a hard one to define because every area has a different home price, right? So if we look at the million plus, if we know that the typical home price in America is about 400,000. So if we look at the million plus, we have seen tremendous growth in that market. I think we will continue to see the million plus having more growth. Again, people earning this housing equity, being able to make housing trades, wealthy home buyers really making the market move right now. If we think about the typical income of a home buyer moving up, their reliance on financial assets as well. So looking at the stock market for down payments, etc. For the second home market, we've seen it slow and steady. So it has been steady in the market. It's been moving in the teens. We haven't seen big swings. So I think I have to look back to January of 2021, and we saw 22% of homes were actually in the second market So that's a long time ago for us to see it that high, and that was really a peak. But we've been moving in the.
So, you're talking about second homes and luxury. What that kind of segues in a really weird way in my ADHD brain into the mortgage lending process. And do you think we're going to see any kind of changes in the? It makes sense, Sterling. I promise. I can leapfrog you there later. Because they're different products, right? But do you think we're going to see any kind of difference in the mortgage lending process or policies that might help ease the difficulty for these first-time home buyers?
Well, I mean, it's possible. We certainly are seeing that if we look at FHA loans, for instance, it's actually declined. The share of buyers who are using FHA loans over time, and the down payment has actually increased the percent. So I think it's a really interesting dynamic. And I don't know if it's because of mortgage lending is so tight. So we're only seeing the select few elite buyers come in as first-time home buyers. And so they're able to put down this larger down payment. They've waited for grants to pass, so they're using their inheritance. I'm not entirely sure what's behind that, but I do know that mortgage lending is tight. It has been tight really coming out of the Great Recession. We have a very tight lending environment, and I don't know that it's going to loosen up just for first-time home buyers moving forward.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, anyone that worked through the Great Recession, that's not a bad thing, right? I mean,
yeah.
People walked in, and if they were maybe breathing, they could get a loan, right? And say maybe breathing because.
Well, I mean, talking about the pets, which certainly had a lot of love. I mean, pets were getting mortgages at that time period, so and able to qualify for mortgages. That's a problem. We should not have a lending environment that cats can have a mortgage.
Some people will definitely argue with you about that. Because someone said earlier that they want to claim pets as dependent on taxes.
Right.
Hey, 16 cats. Can you imagine what that could do to your tax bill? I mean,
that's a lot of cats.
So, okay. And we're non-political here, right? But we do have an administration change coming. Mm-hmm. I was curious. I was just kind of thinking about things this morning. From a national standpoint, administration to administration, whether you're in the transition period like we are now, or the lead up to the election, or the post-election, whichever way it goes, it doesn't matter. What are there industry trends that, whether it is one party or the other, and if so, what are those?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we have an administration change, one of our economists really dug into that, and what they found when the administration changes, regardless of what party is in control, that there actually is an increase in home sales activity the following year. There's a little bit of a pause button as we lead into the election. People say, oh, I don't want to make a big financial purchase. Even if they're living in a place where in no way, or working in a job that in no way would this impact them, they do take a pause. And so perhaps they're just getting too much political mail. I'm not entirely sure, but they take a pause. But then afterwards, it's like a boomerang effect, and then we see more home sales activity into the following year. Certainly true in the DC area, but true around the nation as well.
Interesting. Roland said, what are your thoughts on the potential upcoming changes to immigration and trade policy and impact on labor markets, builders, et cetera?
Yeah, there certainly could be a question there, right? So we know that there are a lot of folks who work in skilled labor building our homes who could be impacted by the immigration policy if there is a change moving forward. So that is a potential impact, but that's a big question mark, I think, right now. Sure. And so as we move forward, we'll start having answers to that. The other big question too is tariffs. So that was brought up last week at the Forecast Summit. So already there is a tariff on lumber. And so if that was an increase, that could impact the cost of building homes, which we already talked about is a concern too, is just the cost of building. So two big question marks, but again, to be determined. We don't know the answers of those right now.
My question there with the increase in lumber costs was, do we see an increase in alternative building products? We have called Aussie block here, basically big limestone stones that they build the exterior walls. And I mean, they're super energy efficient. It is more expensive, but the economic life is much longer. And also steel. And what is the price of steel going to do? We have barn dominiums out here where they're building, part residential, part shop. Not, there's a lot of subdivisions that won't allow that, but, just different alternatives. The fun thing in my brain is, what is the secondary market effect? What is this thing going to cause over here? And I don't know, speculation, of course, but it's always fun to try to think about it and predict it and then wait and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, big question marks that I guess we'll see soon. But I think alternative ways to building have been embraced, or starting to be embraced at least. And that's certainly a good thing. And I think if we look at just the different types of units, you said barn, I can't say the word.
It's like a condominium with barn.
Yep. Nicely done. I'm glad you did that for me. So if we look at that as an alternative type of unit, but then if we also look at adaptive reuse of different types of places as well, I think that's where we need to be thinking moving forward to bring more new construction of residential units in. So thinking about rethinking about vacant hotel motel spaces, vacant malls, residential malls, vacant schools. All of these could actually be residential units, and bringing those residential units in could be unique places, not just the fancy lofts and downtown communities.
So we have some polls. I'm going to throw one up there, so I don't want y'all to get scared if something pops up on your screen. Just talking about what factors you believe will have the most impact on real estate in 2025. I know we've talked about a lot of these, but just to get some information about that, y'all can keep we can keep talking while y'all are answering that question.
So Jessica, Megan, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off real quick because there's a big subject topic that I really want to hit, and it's basically the main difference between the Fed rate cuts and how it relates to the mortgage rates. Anybody that's watching TV today, they're anticipating a Fed rate.
Wow,
I know. Skipped a beat there for a second. Fed rate cut tomorrow, and every time this happens, my social media blows up. Oh, the Fed's going to cut the rates, therefore mortgage rates are coming down. Part of this platform is to educate the agents and understanding what exactly goes into mortgage rates and everything. I'm going to let you take it and just say, what are the differences? Is there any correlation between the two, et cetera? 1, 2, 3, go.
Okay. So the Fed cutting the Fed funds rate is not the mortgage rate. And so when we look at that, we have to know that behind the scenes, before it ever gets to a consumer, is that the amount of money that's loaned between banks to each other. And the premium that's placed on that is essentially what's placed onto the consumer. So the closer tie to mortgage interest rates is actually the 10-year treasury. But in recent years, there has been a widening of the gap between the 10-year treasury, the short-term lending, and long-term lending. So it used to be that there would be a little below 2% gap between the 10-year treasury and the 30-year fixed mortgage interest rate. However, in times of uncertainty, we have seen that gap widen. And so what we actually saw is that was moving more than 2%, 2.5%, or wider, actually, when we looked at the pandemic. And so that gap is narrowing right now. So when we look at where is the 30-year fixed going to go, I would encourage you just to Google really quickly, and it changes every second, really, the 10-year treasury. Where is that right now? And has that seen any movement in it? And that's where you're going to see, I guess, more indication of where the 30-year fixed is going to go. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I can't remember what it was. I was watching whatever on the lead up, and I want to say it was 4.47, and it was increased by, I don't know, 0.27% or whatever, which shows that if we're at 6.7 or whatever on average, that's roughly 2.3, 2.4 difference. So it makes sense.
Yeah. I think when we look at the first rate cut and it was at half, and we went, wow, that's really essentially 2 rate cuts in one, because usually when the Fed moves down and we're looking at a quarter rate cut. But there was so much anticipation. We've been talking about it for weeks, months as an industry, that come September, it was like Christmas. Like we were just like excited about it for months. And so that was really built in, that anticipation already into the market. This one is talked about some, but there was also some speculation that the Fed could say, oh, we'll just wait until January and then we'll cut the rate again. We'll actually take a pause this month. And so I think the anticipation is definitely less so than what we had when we look at the September rate cut.
What would be the motivation to wait?
Well, there would be political motivation that you could do it in one administration versus another. Certainly, though, I will say the Fed is supposed to be not political as an entity. It is not supposed to be lobbied. It is not supposed to be swayed. But there you are. So that could be one motivation. The other one would be that CPI, while it was moving down, so that inflation was moving down, it hasn't been moving to what it was a couple months ago. And so it could be that too, as they say, wait, let's just take a pause in cutting rates. I will say, regardless, rates are anticipated to be cut multiple times as we move into 2025. And so the cost of lending between banks would be moving down as well.
And I know there's a million people smarter than me that run that part, but just to cut, I don't. Hopefully, they don't do that, and they're not influenced or pressured to do that. I feel like we're getting to a point where it's actually affordable. Inflation is coming down, and overcutting. I just hope somebody smarter than me makes those decisions.
Well, they certainly, yes, they're certainly very nerdy and pretty smart. But I would also say that there's been plenty written about how they don't like to be influenced. They're not going to be influenced. They're going to be a very stoic person and be really making decisions without influence.
So Ben had a good question, especially with Amazon announcing that everybody's going back to the office 5 days a week starting in January. How are we still seeing it evolve from post-pandemic numbers where commercial buildings just tanked? Are we starting to see that pick back up?
Yeah, so office is certainly the leg in commercial right now, for sure. And we do not see that people are back 5 days a week in most office settings. And the fact that Amazon made the news by saying you have to come back 5 days a week, I think speaks to itself. And the Washington Post has said that as well in the DC area, that you have to come back 5 days a week, and that made the news. So it's very clear that a lot of people are still taking advantage of working remotely when they can. What I would say for home buyer activity, what I thought was really interesting this year is that if we look a decade ago in the data, we would see that half of home buyers actually said, my workplace location is going to influence where the neighborhood that I choose. Today, it's about a third of home buyers are saying that. Now, some of that is because we have such a high share of retirees in the data, so they're not going to be influenced by their workplace because they're not working. But I also think that is a strong remote work consideration as well. And it's why the distance moved is much longer and farther away. We're still seeing small towns quite popular. We're still seeing outer suburbs quite popular, and stronger activity in those areas than we had seen in the last, well, I would say in comparison to a decade ago. In the last few years, they've been very strong.
So non-real estate related, I always, again, secondary effects of forcing those employees to come back. I want to see the productivity numbers in a year versus where they were a year ago, allowing people the freedom and the, whatever, and then forcing them to come in. I want to see what their labor numbers do. Do people start looking for new jobs? Or is their productivity up or down by having to come to the office? You have to do the commute. You're going to spend money on gas or whatever. That's another one of those super interesting, crystal ball in 12 months. Let's look at it and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, dog walking activity, that would be a secondary market that would certainly go up, right? If you're requiring people to go in, all of these pets that have been adopted during the pandemic and onwards, are going to need someone to walk and train them, and anxiety meds. So yeah, certainly we'll see that change as well.
So Roland is talking about 6 months supply being thought of as a balanced market where buyers and sellers have equal power. Roland, I don't know where you are, but again, that's going to be, very depending on where you are. But Jessica, nationally, what are we seeing as far as terms of supply in this market?
Yeah, so we have seen supply go up, and this has been consistently on a national basis for existing homes. We've seen them go up, I want to say, for 4 months consistently. It may be longer than that. But regardless, we have seen this move up. And this is certainly good news. But what I want you to keep in mind is that even though it's gone up, it's still below February of 2020. So, and if we think about March and moving forward, March of 2020, really the housing market going completely bananas, people purchasing homes, the inventory really dropping to all-time lows that we have recorded before, home sales activity still going really double-digit increases up because so many people were taking advantage of low interest rates. It's hard to know where that equilibrium is. And I think that's your question too, is where is the equilibrium? Is it 4 months? Is it 6 months? 6 months was the academic reasoning that in Austin. So, right, you're seeing more inventory come in, certainly, and lower home sales activity than the intensity that you saw where home prices were going up 45% year over year in Austin at one point. That was insane. So more equilibrium, certainly, than that time period. I think 4 months could be equilibrium in a lot of markets. But just thinking about the enough inventory to go around and the affordability, I think, being the big question mark right now. Because if we look at Austin home prices, it's not like they dropped 45% year over year, even though they increased at that rate. So we know that they consistently went up for many years. And now there is some equilibrium between buyers and sellers. That was a very long, rambling answer. So.
Jessica, is there any like stocks or REITs or ETFs or any of those that you or the NAR watch specifically in gathering your data or anything? I mean, are there specific ones that you watch?
So no, not me personally. I will say that Lawrence Yun, when he puts together, our chief economist, when he puts together his forecast, he is looking at so many measures. So he's looking at certainly all of the housing stats that we are collecting, but he is looking at the activity into the commercial market. He's looking at CPI. He's looking at the jobs numbers. So he's not just strictly looking at NAR's numbers.
Sure. Oh, you said Lawrence. Meagan got a little flushed. She has a bit of a econ crush on Lawrence.
If you've never heard Lawrence Yun speak, he's phenomenal. I'm talking to the people out there. I did get to shake his hand recently. That was a whole nother level. I nerd out with Economist, y'all. You don't understand. You should ask Sterling how flustered I was leading up to today with Jessica coming on.
Oh my gosh. You should not be.
I was like, don't let me fangirl out too much here. So we've got about 7-8 minutes. Jessica, what advice would you have for agents, for anyone in the real estate industry for 2025? What should we be watching? What should we be focusing on? How can we better set ourselves up for a wonderful 2025?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I would say gather as much facts as you possibly can, because obviously this is a quiet period. Please enjoy your holiday season. But I also think it's important to start the year prepared. And I do think that it's likely going to be a much busier spring than we've seen the last 2 years. I think that buyers are ready. They're tired of sitting on the sidelines. They understand that rates are not going to come down. And we're starting to see more inventory even come on. And this is not a time period traditionally where we see more inventory come into the market. This is not necessarily a positive time period for the real estate market. We're starting to see it. So that momentum is certainly gaining. And so gather all the facts that you possibly can. What Sterling and I were talking about at the very beginning, he was asking me questions of how would you talk to a seller who doesn't necessarily want to move, but they need to move. Their house is not working for them anymore. How do you talk to them about that? Get your preparations, get your conversations, have those mock conversations with plenty of people over the holidays as you go to parties. I'm sure they'll be asking you. The other thing I would do, and I would encourage you to, is we have plenty of research on our website at nar.realtor. I see that the website is there. Grab it. It's all for you. It's a realtor benefit. So grab what you want. If you're not using RPR in your local market, use that. That's a free resource for you to use as well. And so getting all of that ready as you go into the new year.
Fantastic.
My favorite word, research. Do the work. And Megan and I teach a class, and I swear I spend 5 minutes saying, this isn't easy. It's not supposed to be easy. Like, do the research, be prepared, have those conversations, talk to your wife, talk to your whoever, practice, you got to have the scripts. You got to be able to say, what you think and be intelligent about doing it. As I just stumbled through that.
Do as I say, not as I do, right?
There you go. Yep.
And I spent the last 10 years owning a brokerage with, at one point we had 30 agents, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we only have 7,000 people in our town. And so, when we got into this market after the boom, what I heard from all the agents is this is hard, right? And what I keep telling them is every market's hard. Was it easy when you were presenting the 15th offer for the same set of buyers and you had 56 other offers on the table and they lost again? That was hard too. 2007, 2008, 2009 was hard. When we're running ragged, it's hard. When it's slow, it's hard. It's always hard. You just have to choose how you react to that. And I think that's a big thing. And I think being educated and knowing your numbers and your stats will help elevate you above other professionals in this field.
That's such great advice, Megan. I mean, I remember during that intense period in the pandemic when the housing market went completely bananas, that's where I learned the term agent fatigue. It wasn't just buyer fatigue, it was agent fatigue. So this is a different market, and the approaches will be different, but perhaps a little more equilibrium between buyers and sellers is not such a bad thing.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Where are we at on a global level, compared to other countries? As far as housing affordability and, inflation rates, etc.
Sure. I think I got the last half of the question and my computer internet decided to be crazy there. But as far as housing affordability goes, the typical income to be able to purchase the typical home in America right now is about $400,000 with 20% down. Again, very rare, but just doing the math. We're looking just under $100,000. That has come down because interest rates have come down. So that's been a little bit improvement there. But I would say housing affordability is the big concern moving forward. If we're starting to see more inventory, but we know that affordability is still this huge concern, that could be the big hurdle that we're seeing. And so hopefully not seeing a housing market where just having wealthy people make housing trades and people who have been homeowners make housing trades. We do need to bring the first-time home buyers back into the market.
So I know it froze, but the question was like on a global level, how do we compare to other countries on a housing affordability?
Oh, no. So worldwide, this is a concern. So
Gotcha.
Really, if we look at other countries, so if we look at the big comparison that I think can easily be made is to the UK or to Canada, housing affordability is a huge concern in those places as well. So as we think about the US, we are not alone in this. The storyline of young adults not having enough homes, the storyline of people doubling up is really something that we are seeing in many countries across the world.
All right. I think that is just about our time. Jessica, thank you so much for being here and sharing the information with us today. We truly, truly appreciate it. I did want to say thank you to our sponsor, Agent eLearning. I think they have an offer for you guys. If you need continuing education, 15% off continuing education. And if anyone needs to get any by the end of the year, I do want to say Agent eLearning does not offer it, but you do have to get your code of ethics training by December 31st. Please, y'all go do that. NAR provides it for free. Your local boards are likely providing it. You just have a few more days to get that done. Thank you everyone for being here. We appreciate it. And we truly look forward to having y'all in the January webinar. We will be talking about international real estate. So thank you again.
And go to our YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe. And Jessica, thank you again. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.